In this video, I'm going to show you how to put a 2-inch leveling kit on a 2012 Dodge Ram Cummins 3/4 ton pickup. So, we're going to start, get the tire off, and we'll go over a couple key things to be aware of here. Okay, a couple tools you'll need is a 15mm socket to pull off your sway bar link, 15mm wrench to hold it. This is a ratcheting 15mm wrench. It just makes it a little bit easier to get the upper support off for the shock. This has got a long extension with a 9mm socket that helps get the shock off as well. 18mm, that is what the shock nut on top of the shock, and we'll go over all that in a minute. And these are just for getting the tire on and off, and a big pry bar always helps in every situation, I think. So, key things we need to do: we got 2 jacks. So we have one underneath the back, that's just holding the truck, and the one on the front we're using to raise the axle up and down. So it's pretty simple. Remove the nut on your sway bar link and then just leave it. It'll come out on its own when you lower the axle down. Then on top, you can get up here and see it. I have to get a better image from up above, but the nut for the shock is right up here on top. So the shock stud actually has a 9mm hex end. So the best thing is to get your box end of your wrench on the nut, and then you can put the socket down on top of the stud, and between the two of them you can get that nut off. Sometimes you can just get an impact wrench and hit it real hard and they'll come off, but that hasn't been our luck. So we actually hit everything with some PB Blaster to begin with for good luck. Another thing they always recommend, you can see the position of the spring, that's the end of the spring. Just try to put everything back in the same position that you took it out. Kind of makes things a little better. And then there's this upper support here. There's 3 nuts. There's one here, and then one on the back side on each side there. So what we're going to do, so we'll first remove this nut on the sway bar link. We'll remove the nut on the shock, and then we'll remove these. And then from that point, we got to lower the axle down enough to get the spring to pop out a little bit, and then we'll put our spacer in. So we'll go to that point, and then we'll explain anything that was a little bit helpful. All right, we got everything loose, and we dropped the axle down. Now this side, or we've already done the other side, and since we already did the other side, this side dropped down farther than really wanted to, or than the other side did. So a couple things. When we did the other side, we actually, because you can't get the axle down far enough to get the spacer and the spring in there, so we actually pulled out the rubber stop here and stuck a bottle jack in right here on top of where the rubber stop hits, and we just jacked the axle down enough to where we could put the new spacer in. And put the new spacer in, which is right there. So it's a 2-inch spacer. You can get them in like 2.5 and sometimes 3, but 2 is the standard. And so that happened to level this truck out perfectly. So we got the spacer in, then we got a pry bar, and just kind of messed around with it and decided the best place to pry, and we were able to pop it down underneath. So a couple things. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get this spring out of the way, and we're going to stick that spacer up in here. And it has 3 studs, kind of like this ring. This ring will come out, and in place of this ring the spacer goes. So we'll put the spacer in, put the shock support back up in here, bolt it all down, and then you want to leave this rubber insulator shock absorber or cushion, here you go. You want to leave that in there and put it in place with the spacer. So another thing you got to do is our shock right here, we got to push it down out of the way. So we'll go ahead and push it down, pull the spring out of the way, stick the spacer in, and then get it all back in place. Alright, we got the spacer in, as you can see. And a couple things: when you drop the axle down, the way the control arms are hooked up on the back, the axle naturally wants to swing towards the back of the truck. So when you go to put the spring in and the shock, you really have to shove them forward to get them to line up. But as you lift the axle back up with the jack, everything starts to go back up into place. So just beware of that. And you can see right in here, you can see the little, this spring's actually sitting down into a groove where it was supposed to be. So that's what I was mentioning before, that you want to make sure that you get your spring back in the same location. So now we're just going to jack it back up and attach all the hardware, and you are good to go.